I never thought I'd be the one sitting here telling this story. 47 years of marriage, and then suddenly, he was gone. My name is Margaret, and 2 years ago I lost James, my husband, my best friend, my entire world. The days that followed his passing were, well, I can barely remember them now. It was like I was underwater, sounds muffled, colors dulled. I'd wake up and reach for him, only to find cold sheets beside me. The grief wasn't just emotional, it was physical, like carrying stones in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I never imagined at 73 that I'd have to rebuild my life from scratch. And I certainly never thought I'd end up in therapy. But that one decision to ask for help, it saved my life. You know, they say there are stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. What they don't tell you is that these stages aren't neat little boxes you check off. They're more like waves that crash over you when you least expect it. Sometimes all in the same day. James and I had our retirement all planned out. We were going to travel, spend time with our grandkids, plant that garden we'd always talked about. We'd saved for it, prepared for it. What I hadn't prepared for was doing it alone. The first few months after James died, I functioned on autopilot. I'd get up, make coffee for 2 out of habit, catch myself, and then just stand there staring at that second cup. Our children were wonderful, calling daily, visiting when they could. But they had their own lives, their own families. And when they'd leave, the silence in the house was deafening. I started avoiding our friends, couples we'd known for decades. It was too painful seeing them together, knowing James and I would never again be that couple holding hands across the dinner table. I made excuses, declined invitations, and slowly, my world became smaller and smaller until it was just me and my memories in a house that felt too big and too empty. I didn't recognize it as depression at first. I just thought this was grief, this was what widowhood looked like. But grief and depression, while related, aren't the same thing. Grief is a natural response to loss. Depression is when that grief starts to interfere with your ability to function, to find any joy, to see any future for yourself. 6 months after James died, I realized I hadn't left the house in 2 weeks except to get groceries. I wasn't cooking anymore, just eating whatever was easiest. Some days I didn't eat at all. I'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. My daughter noticed it when she visited. "Mom," she said, "when was the last time you changed out of those pajamas?" I couldn't remember. Sleep became either impossible or all I did. Some nights I'd lie awake until dawn, replaying memories or worrying about things I'd never worried about when James was alive. Other days I'd sleep until noon, then take a nap at 3, then go to bed at 8. What was the point of being awake? What was there to wake up for? The worst part was the thought that kept creeping in, this is it. This is the rest of my life. Alone. Empty. Purposeless, that thought. That was the darkest place. Because when you can't see a future worth living, you start to wonder why you're living at all. My turning point came on what would have been our 48th wedding anniversary. I had planned to spend the day looking through old photo albums, which in retrospect was probably not the healthiest choice. My son called that morning to check on me, and something in my voice must have alarmed him because 3 hours later, he was at my door with my daughter-in-law and my oldest grandchild. They found me still in bed, curtains drawn, surrounded by photos and James's old sweater that I still couldn't bring myself to put away. The look on my grandson's face, that mixture of concern and fear, it broke something open in me. He was only 12, but he looked at me and said, "Grandma, are you going to be okay?" And for the first time, I answered honestly, "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know how to be okay without Grandpa." That afternoon, my son gently suggested therapy. I resisted at first. In my generation, therapy wasn't something we talked about. Mental health struggles were kept private, handled within the family, or often just ignored. "I'm too old to start talking to a stranger about my feelings," I told him. "What good would it do now?" "Mom," he said, "you're 73, not 103. You could have another 20 good years ahead of you. Do you want to spend them like this?" That question hit me like a truck. 20 more years. Without James. The thought was overwhelming. But 20 more years like the past 6 months. That was unbearable. So I agreed. Not enthusiastically, but I agreed to try one session. Just one. For my kids' sake. Finding a therapist who specializes in elderly grief and depression wasn't as difficult as I expected. My doctor recommended someone, and my insurance covered most of it. Still, walking into that office the first time, I felt like such a failure. Like I should have been able to handle this on my own. Doctors. Mitchell was nothing like the stern, note-taking psychiatrist I'd imagined. She was about my age, with kind eyes and an office that felt more like a living room than a clinical space. She didn't start by asking me how I felt about my mother or delving into my childhood. She simply said, "Tell me about James," and just like that, the dam broke. I talked for almost the entire hour about James, how we met in college, our early struggles, raising our children, his sense of humor, the way he could fix anything, how he always burned the bacon but made perfect pancakes. I talked until my throat was dry, and she just listened. At the end of the session, she said something I'll never forget. "Margaret, grief is the price we pay for love. And it sounds like you and James had a love worth every penny of that price." I cried all the way home. But it was different from the tears. I'd been crying for months. These felt cleansing somehow. Like I was finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I'd lost, instead of just trying to survive it. I scheduled a second appointment before I even left her office. Therapy isn't magic. It doesn't suddenly make everything better. It's work, sometimes painful, exhausting work. Over the next few months, Dr. Mitchell and I developed what she called a toolbox for managing my depression. First, we established a routine. Simple things like setting an alarm, getting dressed every day, making my bed. Basic self-care that I'd abandoned. She encouraged me to start walking daily, just around the block at first. The combination of sunlight and movement was surprisingly effective at lifting my mood, even if just temporarily. We talked about medication, which I was hesitant about. But doctors. Mitchell explained that depression in older adults can be affected by physiological changes in the brain, not just emotional circumstances. "Would you refuse medication for high blood pressure?" she asked. This isn't so different. After discussing it with my primary doctor, I started a low dose of an antidepressant. It wasn't a miracle cure, but after a few weeks, I noticed the heaviness began to lift, just enough that I could start doing the other work. The hardest sessions were the ones where we talked about identity. "Who are you now without James, Doctor?" Mitchell would ask. For so long, I'd been one half of James and Margaret. Now I had to figure out who just Margaret was. What did I like? What did I want? What gave me purpose? I couldn't answer those questions at first. They seemed impossible. But slowly, session by session, I started to rediscover parts of myself that had been overshadowed by grief. The woman who once loved to paint. The woman who had strong opinions about politics and wasn't afraid to share them. The woman who could learn new things. One of the most important aspects of my recovery was reconnecting with people. Isolation is both a symptom and a cause of depression, especially in older adults. Doctors. Mitchell suggested I join a grief support group, specifically for widows and widowers. The first meeting, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, almost talking myself out of going in. But I remembered my promise to my son, took a deep breath, and walked through the door. Inside, I found something I hadn't expected: understanding. These people, ranging from their 50s to their 80s, knew exactly what it was like. They knew about the empty side of the bed, the dinners for one, the silent house, the well-meaning but sometimes hurtful comments from others. You'll find someone new, at least he didn't suffer. He's in a better place, as if any of that filled the James-shaped hole in my life. In that room, I didn't have to explain or justify my grief. I could just be a woman who missed her husband terribly, and that was enough. Through the group, I met Alina, a widow of 3 years who lived just a few blocks from me. We started having coffee once a week, then twice. She introduced me to water aerobics at the community center, something I would have never tried on my own. The movement was good for my arthritic knees, and being in a group of active seniors reminded me that life didn't end at widowhood. About 8 months into therapy, Dr. Mitchell asked me a question that changed everything. What would James want for you now? I sat with that for a long time. And the answer was clear. James would hate seeing me like this. The man who brought me wildflowers just because it was Tuesday, who encouraged me to go back to school when our youngest started kindergarten, who always said I was the strongest woman he knew. He would want me to live. Really live, not just exist. So I started small. I volunteered at the library one afternoon a week, shelving books and helping with the children's reading program. Being around the energy of children was exhausting, but also invigorating. They didn't tiptoe around me or look at me with pity. They just wanted me to help them find books about dinosaurs or space. Then, with Dr. Mitchell's encouragement, I revisited an old dream. James and I had always talked about taking painting classes together when we retired, but we never got around to it. I signed up for a beginner's watercolor class at the community college. My first paintings were terrible, absolute disasters. But the act of creating something, of focusing so intently on color and form that hours would pass without me thinking about my grief, that was healing in a way I hadn't expected. The most meaningful change came when I started mentoring. The grief support group connected me with a program that paired recently widowed people with those further along in their journey. Suddenly, I was the one offering advice, sharing coping strategies, listening to someone else's pain. Using my experience to help others gave purpose to my suffering. It didn't make losing James any less painful, but it meant that my pain could have meaning. I wish I could say that after a year of therapy, I was completely healed. That's not how grief works, especially not at my age. After losing a partner of nearly 5 decades, there are still hard days. Birthdays, holidays, Random Tuesdays, when a song comes on the radio that was our song. Depression isn't something you cure like a cold. For many of us, especially after a significant loss, it's something we learn to manage. Like a chronic condition that flares up sometimes and requires attention. I still see Dr. Mitchell, though less frequently now. We've moved from weekly sessions to monthly check-ins. I still take my medication, still make myself go for walks even on days when I'd rather stay in bed, still reach out to friends when I feel the isolation creeping back in. The difference is that now I have tools. I recognize the warning signs when depression starts to tighten its grip again. I know that isolating myself makes it worse. I know that movement helps, that creativity helps, that helping others helps. Most importantly, I've learned that asking for help isn't weakness. It's actually one of the bravest things you can do, especially for someone of my generation who was taught to keep a stiff upper lip and carry on. The most surprising part of this journey has been discovering that there can still be joy after such profound loss. Not the same. Joy, nothing will ever be the same without James. But different joy. New joy. Joy in watching my great-granddaughter take her first steps. Joy in mastering a particularly difficult watercolor technique. Joy in the simple pleasure of a cup of tea and a good book on a rainy afternoon. I've even found joy in new relationships. Not romantic ones, though I know some widows and widowers do find love again, and that's wonderful. But I've developed friendships that are deep and meaningful in ways I wouldn't have thought possible at this stage of life. Alina and I now travel together occasionally, short trips to the coast, or to visit museums in the city. Last year, 3 of us from the grief support group rented a cabin in the mountains for a weekend. We stayed up late, drinking wine and sharing stories about our spouses, laughing at the funny memories more than crying at the sad ones. I still talk to James every day. Out loud in our house, as if he can hear me. And maybe he can. But I'm no longer living only in the past. I'm present in today, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. If you're watching this and you're where I was 2 years ago, drowning in grief, unable to see a way forward, wondering if this emptiness is all that's left for you, please hear me. It doesn't have to be. Depression after loss is common, especially for us older folks who have built our lives around a partnership that spanned decades. But it's not inevitable, and it's not permanent. Therapy saved my life, not by taking away my grief, but by helping me build a life around it. A life that honors James and everything we had together, while still allowing me to find meaning and even joy in the days I have left. It takes courage to ask for help. Maybe more courage than anything else you've done. But you've already survived the worst day of your life. You've already shown incredible strength. This is just one more brave step. Talk to your doctor. Reach out to a grief counselor. Join a support group. If the first therapist isn't a good fit, try another. If you're concerned about cost, many community mental health centers offer services on a sliding scale, and Medicare does cover mental health treatment. You don't have to do this alone. In fact, you shouldn't. We humans aren't meant to carry such heavy burdens by ourselves. I still miss James every single day. I always will. But now, alongside that grief, there's gratitude for what we had, for the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren we created together, for the memories that still make me smile. And there's gratitude for the life I'm still living. The life that, with help, I was able to reclaim from depression's grip. If you're struggling with elderly grief or depression after loss, please reach out. Talk to someone. Take that first step. The path forward exists, even if you can't see it right now. I promise you, it's there. And you deserve to find it. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves and each other.